It seems like the current meta is here to stay for at least one more week, so in this video, again, I will show you what are the best decks in Hearthstone right now, so you know what to be playing with. We were expecting to hear something about the nerfs yesterday, but since that didn't happen, it's anyone's guess, but traditionally, things like this happen on Tuesday, so until then, the meta is probably gonna remain the same. We're gonna go over 5 of the best performing decks right now, but we will also check out every single working archetype for each class, so you know what you should be expecting against you. If you enjoy what I'm doing, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And also don't forget you can hire me for some Hearthstone coaching. Now let's check out the decks.
You are not prepared!
To no one's surprise, the first deck on the list is still gonna be Miracle Rogue. And this deck is one of the best performers for quite a while now, and with a big margin. The deck is very fast, it can cheat out a ton of stats, and it does all-around broken things, which is why surely it's getting nerfed really soon. So be careful crafting this one. No need for me to go into details about it. I've already gave you a detailed guide about it, I've shown you coaching sessions with it, so you can just check out those and see all of the busted things you could be doing with it. Matchup wise, here's what it looks like, and we have plenty of stats to look over through, and as you can see, there's literally no real bad matchups for it. The worst one would be Plague Priest, and it's just a 45, that's not even a bad matchup, that's a 50-50. Control Paladin is also supposed to be decently good against it, and that is why you can see some of those in Top Legend, but all around, everything else is pretty green. Mulligan-wise, going first and second, these would be your top 3 picks. You always want Potion Belt, your Cutlass, your Wild Pognol, and also the Sinstone Graveyard. Concoctor is not really something you want to be keeping, don't get baited by it, it's not really a one drop you want to be playing on curve, it's something you'd rather top deck later on, so you can load up either Edwin or just bigger locations. Edwin I also am not a super huge fan of just keeping like that, but if you already have Cutlass and Potion Belt, sure, maybe you can keep Edwin too. And when on the coin, here's what the situation looks like. It's pretty similar, but also Ghoulish Alchemist becomes a lot more capable, as well as Scribbling Scribe, and you can definitely also consider keeping Shadow of Demise, because you can even use it just as a second coin, and that can be huge. For other good rogue decks, we also still have Thief Rogue doing well, with the 40 variant. There's also a version with Krakatoa, but there's also variants with Jackpot Rogue with the 30 variants too. So you have options. Death Rattle Rogue is barely under 50%, so it's not exactly amazing anymore. On the number 2 spot, again to no one's surprise, Quest Spell Demon Hunter is absolutely destroying Top Legend as well, so this is obviously the second best performer here. The deck is very popular on the top ranks, but you can also spot it from Diamond to Legend as well often, and if people know what they're doing with it, they're gonna be flying through the ranks. The 3 minions you're running into your weapon are your Abusive Sergeant, your Lady Steno, as well as the Spell Power Girl, so you can get some extra healing. And the problem with this deck is, if it gets the card draw, it has so many ways of killing the opponent, you can't even play around it much. They're also running the quest so they can get some discounts on their first 2 steps of the quest, and they don't really care about the last step, they don't really need the Kurtrus. And games don't normally last that long anyway, so imagine trying for a 5-drop. You also have an Eldrazi Warblade in here so you can heal yourself up. You have a lot of damage with things like Fel Barrage, Mark of Scorn, Felderay Warband, but also with the Sinful Brand, if the opponent actually gives you a big enough minion, you can just mark it, go face with a Felderay, and ram everything into that minion, so you get a lot of extra damage like that. Matchup wise, you're gonna be seeing very weird stats here, but it all comes down to the player's skill, so if you're actually good with the deck, this is gonna be a lot greener, like a lot greener. Things like Control Warrior, however, definitely do counter it, especially if they're running the Tech Warrior that destroys their minions, but also they simply gain too much armor for them to go through. Same can be said about things like Ram Druid, and also Big Spell Mage might be a problem, but all around you should definitely be climbing with easy with it. Mulligan wise, going first and second, I think you always keep Spectral Sight, Sigil, Mark of Scorn is also good. And I'm not really sure about the Felderay Warband, maybe it's just a tempo play, maybe you can just be using it as a tempo play, but also you can combo it off with your Feast of Souls to get tons of card draw like that, but I'm not exactly sure if it's really this high on the keep. When on the coin, again Spectral Sight, Sigil, and Mark of Scorn are pretty good. Again, Felderay is really high. Eldrazi Warblade becomes a lot more capable. And even Feast of Souls again, this time probably definitely for the Warband combo. For other good Demon Hunter decks, we have several iterations of the Quest Spell Demon Hunter, including still the Relic Demon Hunter with Jace. But also Aggro Demon Hunter is doing very well, and it's a lot more simple of a deck, and very fast too. So if you want a simple Demon Hunter, you can check out my guide about Aggro Demon Hunter, which is actually what I reached Legend with this season, so it's definitely strong. On the number 3 spot is my personal favorite, which is Shockspitter Hunter, which is still a really powerful deck, but not as complicated as, let's say, Quest Spell DH. I've coached plenty of people with this to Legend quite easily in the last few weeks, and if you know what you're doing with it, climbing should be a breeze. This particular variant is actually working in top 1000 Legend as well, and you might have noticed we don't have a Barrack Kotobane in this one, but instead we have a second Stormpike Battle Ram, and we also don't have the Keen Eye Spotters here, because the meta at the top is a lot less board-centric, so Keen Eye Spotter is kind of a dead card anyway. What you have instead is plenty of weapons with 2 Harpoon Guns, 2 Bloodseekers, and 2 Candle Shots, and you also have all of the good Wild Seed cards so you can get extra shots at the stags, and so on. The deck has 2 basic game plans. One would be to tempo a lot and get a Hydrolodon on 5, and the other one would be to play defensively and just stack up your Shock Spitter combo so you can take the game from there. A lot of people completely ignore the fact that you can get a Stormpike Ram into a Hydrolodon as soon as turn 5, and that is how you're gonna be winning actually most of your games. Like the meta is just too fast nowadays for you to try to stack up really big chickens in most games. So instead, going for a faster Hydrolodon is usually the way to go. And also, Beastalker Tavish is giving you a ton of extra reach with the new secret Motion Denied, which can deal 9 damage if the opponent plays into it, and they often do, because that's how their deck works. And with Explosive Trap, that's extra 12 damage like that, if you get those 2 secrets. We also have Devouring Swarm, so you can recycle your chickens mostly, but you can use it in all sorts of different ways if the situation requires it, and you also obviously have the Astlore game plan, which is great on his own too. But you're rarely gonna actually have to be using an 8-drop Astlore with this deck. Matchup-wise, again, it doesn't really have really bad matchups. The only somewhat bad matchup would be Miracle Rogue, and traditionally, on the more popular lists, you're gonna be seeing stats like 45-ish% win rate here. Personally, for me, Quest Spell DH has been quite the problem, but with this variant of the deck, it seems like it's just better of a matchup too. Mulligan-wise, going first, Trog is always going to be a keep, as well as your Candle Shot. Hydrolodon can also be a keep in most matchups. Against a real warrior, I'd say you wouldn't really be keeping it. And also Doggy Biscuit works wonderfully, especially if you already have a sticky 1-drop like a Trog, or a Batty Guest. Beastalker Tavish can also be a keep, Stormpike Ram often is a keep as well, Spirit Poacher as well, and against Selective Breeder can be amazing, especially if you already have the Stormpike or the Hydrolodon, or just the second Selective Breeder that just ensures that you're going to be having a turn 5 Hydrolodon, and that's just insane. Harpoon Gun I also like keeping a lot of the times, and if you already don't have a good 2-drop, Bloodseeker can also be a keep. Wild Spirits is also a pretty good keep too. When on the coin it's basically the same, but Trog becomes a little bit less keepable, but depending on the matchup you're probably still going to want to drop it as a 1-drop. Selective Breeder, I would still consider it, especially if I already have one of the other 2 beasts, and the rest is pretty much the same. For other good hunter lists, we also have variants with Barrack Kotobane, we also have the Beast Hunter with the 40 variant still doing strong. There's even a variant with Hope of Kel'Thuzad, which is kinda weird, but I guess it could make sense. And there's also Face Hunter out there, which can also be pretty decent, finishing off with collateral damage. On the number 4 spot, we have another aggro deck, which is Pure Paladin, which is really decent from Diamond 5 to Legend 2. This again is a very popular list out there, so you've probably seen it already. You basically want to curve out with your small Divine Shield dudes, buff them up, smack face, and if the game lasts long enough, you can also go into Blood Crusader, into the Countess, and she can give you some pretty OP cards for 0 mana. This variant is also running Hold the Bridge, which is not something I've seen in most lists, but this is one of the better performers out there, so it might be a good idea to try it out. We also have a couple of Buffet Biggins, which can be insanely good, especially on curve, and Carrier Rome is a great rush Divine Shield minion, which can also discount some stuff for you too. Matchup-wise, Frost DK is gonna be a problem for you because they have too much freezing and AoEs. Aggro Mage can also be on the iffy part, and also Imp Warlock seems to be not an amazing matchup for you too, probably because of their control-y tools. Mulligan-wise, on the coin you basically want to curve out with your good cheap minions, and you could even consider keeping things like Seal of Blood, which is an insanely good buff. And when going second, the situation is pretty much similar. Buffet Biggin becomes a lot more keepable too, but all around you're trying to curve out well. For other good Paladin decks, as you can see, the aggro pure variants are taking the top spots, but there's also a bit more control-y variants with Leviathan and Cariel, which are also doing okay, and also straight up control Paladins, which are actually doing well in top Legend as well, sniping some of the other top performing decks. We also have Dragon Paladin doing okay-ish, and also Silverhand Paladin is doing okay too. And on the last spot, we also have Frost Death Knight, which is also still doing fairly well, even though I feel like the meta kinda turned against it. With Frost DK, you want to be tempoing out your early game minions, assemble a good hand with a bunch of spells, and around turn 6-7, explode the opponent's face or just freeze them forever with Frostworm Furies. The problem with Frostworm Furies nowadays is a lot of the opponents are actually just still gonna straight up kill you from hand without having a board, so that's kind of a problem. But if you're facing more board-centric matchups, this should be a pretty good deck for you again. We also have a couple of Vicious Litter Spears, which seem to have become a staple for this deck as well. But yeah, the rest is basically traditional Frost DK, and you guys should check out my detailed guide about it. Matchup-wise, Ram Druid is gonna be very bad for you, because they tend to gain a lot more armor than you can actually dish damage out. Quest Spell Demon Hunter is also pretty bad, and also the Warriors are not gonna be too fun for you as well, but at least you're gonna be okay against things like Miracle Rogue, as well as Shockspitter Hunter. For the mulligan, going first, these are gonna be the top 5 cards you wanna be holding. Thessarian, Harbinger, Vicious, Bonebreaker, and Chill Fallen Baron can be pretty awesome, even though Baron is a little bit on the expensive side here, but if you're already curving into it, it's pretty good, and it also gives you tons of card draw. Horn of Winter can also make some sense, especially if you already have a Harbinger of Winter, so you can dish out extra tempo like that. Frigate Dower can also be a keep, but I would not really be keeping things like School Teacher. Nerubian Visor can also be a pretty decent keep, especially if you have the Harbinger, so you can get the Undead combo. Lady Death Whisper, she's a little bit iffy, but if you have again Harbinger and Chill Fallen Baron, that's gonna give you a lot of card draws, so she should be able to get you a lot of extra gas. One on the coin, it's similar, but here you also would definitely like to be keeping things like Frost Strike, but the rest remains pretty much the same. For Death Knight, other good lists would also be Frost DK with some blood cards, which can be pretty disgusting, but the stats for it are not as good as the traditional Just Frost. There's also an Unholy Death Knight, which seems to be doing better than it used to, with about 55% win rate. Blood Death Knight is also still usable, and it's a very control-y deck, so if you're into that playstyle, this might be interesting for you. There's also a 30 variant of it, and the rest is basically iterations of those. For the classes we haven't mentioned, starting off with Druid, we have Aggro Druid as the best performer, but also Ram Druid is doing pretty decently, and right now the best performer seems to be with the Naga Giant for the Ram Druid at least, but personally I definitely like the version with Raid Boss Onyxia and Denaphrius, so you can actually be able to tempo out some pretty big boys very fast. With mages, we have Big Spell Mage farming some of the best performing decks out there, and also Aggro Mage has been doing fairly well too. For Priest, in Top Legend there's a Miracle Priest which is absolutely disgusting with Sister Svala, but it's a very hard deck to actually pilot optimally, so the stats here are not gonna be represented correctly. There's also Undead Priest from Diamond 5 to Legend, I guess. Blessed Priest, people are still using it, but it was a hard deck before the nerf and now it's even harder. And Plague Priest still exists, but the stats for them are just not great anymore. For Shamans, Evolve Shaman is the best performer right now, but you also might meet some Swarm Shamans out there, and Control Shaman is also still a thing. Murloc Shaman seems to be the worst of the bunch though. With Warlock, we still have Imp Warlock at the top, and Cursed Imp Warlock is also pretty decent. Phylactery Warlock seems to have fallen though. And with Warriors, we have Enraged Warrior being the best performer, at least from Diamond to Legend, but in Top Legend you could see this new Control Tech Warrior that's trying to farm off some of the best performers at the top. So that's gonna be it for this top 5 guys, hope this helps you figure out what you will be playing until the next nerfs hit. If you found the video helpful, definitely leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, I'm Kris05 and I'll see you in my next video or stream.